Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Trust the Process. Today is a guest episode. As you've already heard from the introduction, we have Tori Collins on the podcast, and I'm just going to hand the mic straight over to her to give herself a little introduction to you all.
Hello. Obviously you just already introduced me. But I'm Tori. I'm a BANT registered nutritionist. And obviously by the accent, I'm not from around here. So I grew up in Australia, and then I moved here when I was about 8, and I've lived in the UK ever since. And it's my home. And through my own health journey as a teenager, I really struggled with my skin and my periods and my mental health. And it was through diet and lifestyle that I just made a huge impact on my health, and gradually just came and found this passion and thought, I want to make this into a career, and here I am. So I work sort of one-to-one, looking at the root cause and investigating health symptoms by using functional testing, and helping people just change their diet and their lifestyle in simple and easy ways to manage, because these days with the rise of TikTok and Instagram, everyone is just so confused as to what they should or shouldn't be doing. But I'm just a huge advocate of there is no one size fits all approach, and everything should be personalized, because my lifestyle is completely different to yours, Claudia, and so is everyone who is listening. There's no point following someone else's diet or their lifestyle, because you are you and you're unique. Your body is entirely unique, and that's why there's not one answer. And that's almost very difficult for people to fathom, that there's not you can't I can't recommend a single diet for absolutely everyone, and that's going to be the golden diet for everyone. It doesn't work like that. And I think that's where, through sort of personalized nutrition, you can really get into the nitty-gritty and really make huge impacts on people's lives, because they're like, oh, I've never even thought about that. And it's just a case of everyone has different jobs, they have different commitments, and by just having sort of you have someone take a look at your life as a whole, when you're so close to your own health or your own issues, you can't see the wood for the trees. You just kind of need someone to come in with a bird's eye view and be like, right, this is what we're going to do, let me give you a plan. And then you go away and you do it, and you feel like, oh wow, I could never have done this on my own. Obviously people do that. People, I've DIY'd my health, but at the end of the day, I actually still have a nutritionist myself, because even though I have all of this knowledge, it's just like PTs, they have their own PT. Same with business mentors, they have their own business mentors. You can't be expected to do everything on your own. And I think so many of us are trying to do that these days, and we're just getting nowhere, and we're feeling more helpless about it and falling deeper and deeper, especially with just all of this information that's at our fingertips, and we just don't know what to do with it. It's so confusing out there. And so you'll know yourself, having studied to be a health coach, how much information there is.
Definitely.
You have it bottled up inside you, and
no, it's so true. I feel like in a way it's almost like there's an endless kind of pit of knowledge, and I think that is the case, but I think it's that maybe it's that kind of need that we have as humans, and to try and understand everything, and feel like we have to go down every rabbit hole and become an expert at everything. And then that's how I feel like you can end up falling into those patterns of listening to people that, because they seem like they know more than you on TikTok or Instagram Reels or whatever, that they're an expert in XYZ from a 90-second video, but I mean, they could be, but you also really have no idea. And it's just that need to feel like you see that there's so much knowledge that you don't know. And especially I think nowadays, like we were talking just before we started recording about how, especially during COVID times, like that was a period where a lot of people kind of started to wake up in a sense of starting to question how much they really knew about their own health, how in control they really were of their own health. And I think it's sometimes it can be like going from that nothing to everything, going from one extreme to the other, of being like realizing that you were so out of control, even if you felt like you lived a seemingly healthy lifestyle or had a seemingly healthy diet or whatever it is, and then suddenly feeling or maybe realizing you don't, and then maybe that panic sets in or that fear sets in or that, oh my goodness, but what do I actually have to do? I don't want to study nutrition, I don't want to get a coach just yet, I don't want to blah blah blah. And so you can end up going down that hole a bit, I think. But I would love to just piggyback off of what you were saying in your introduction, just to dive in straight away. If you could tell everyone what exactly is personalized nutrition and what is functional testing.
Yeah. So a lot of people get confused around, there are so many different labels, I guess. You know, you've got nutritionists, you've got dietitians, you've got health coaches, you've got nutritional therapists. And while everyone kind of works with food and nutrition, we all do them in very like different ways, I guess. So in terms of like nutritional therapy, mine is a combination of both nutrition and lifestyle, because I have the belief that you can't just work on diet, because you could have like the best diet, but if your lifestyle is just shocking, and you know you're in a super stressed job, or you know your kids like are driving you mad, or you've got like some emotional like traumas going on, it just, your health will never pick up from that, even if your diet is just absolutely fabulous. So you know, that's why I kind of think it's coming at health from so many different perspectives, and having someone sort of come into that and being like, right, I'm not going to tell you what I told my client before, because you're just completely different. And it's acknowledging the fact that your body, like, it works holistically. So your body works as a whole. You don't just get one symptom and then another symptom crops up, just completely unrelated. So a lot of our symptoms are interconnected, certainly from like a lot of nutrient deficiencies. That there's something that I use, it's called the rule of three, that I was taught in terms of like looking at nutrient deficiencies. If someone's got a symptom, and all three of them point towards a certain nutrient deficiency, that's probably like what it's indicating. Whereas like you can have, say for example, if you got like a twitchy eye, you know, could mean anything. You could just have like a bit of something in your eye. But if you had tender breasts before your period, and you get muscle cramps along with twitchy eyelashes, that could be a sign that you're deficient in magnesium, because they're all like symptoms point towards certain nutrient deficiencies. But when you start to see them adding up, that's when you think, okay, it's probably that. So in terms of, that's what kind of personalized nutrition looks at, is it's taking into account your diet, what's your job, what's your stress levels, you know, what's your exercise like. Whereas if you're just, say, like a nutritionist, and you'll know that yourself as a health coach, I'm under the impression that you wouldn't be able to do sort of functional testing and supplements to a certain extent compared to what I can do. And in terms of like functional testing, I describe them as like fancy laboratory tests that look at your body from a functional perspective, in how you can function optimally. So everyone might be, you know, you might be tired, but you still function, but it's how well do you function.
Right.
And obviously this morning I'm very tired from, you know, quite a few mornings of getting up really early, that I'm probably not functioning optimally. And obviously I can still go about my day as I am, you know, with a little bit of tiredness. Would I want to feel like this all the time? Absolutely not. But a lot of people, they go through life just feeling like they're coasting through certain things, and they're just coasting along with their health. Whereas you can get to a point where, you know, I don't know, I've done that before myself, where I've got no symptoms. And I'm not talking about like, oh, you get the odd thing here or there. I'm talking about like, someone would ask me, okay, what are your health problems? And I'd be like, I've got none. Like, you know, and not a lot of people can say that. And even myself, I'm constantly working through my own health, and there'll be periods of time where, you know, I get certain things flare up. But there was certainly a point, you know, a couple of years ago, after I'd worked with a nutrition therapist myself, and I got to a point I was like, I've got no issues here. Like, my skin was amazing, my periods were great, you know, my immunity was like really good. But a lot of people, they think, oh, well, I've got nothing wrong with my health. And then when you really start to dig deeper, it's like, oh, well, you know, I only go to the toilet maybe once every 3 days, and you know, I've got really bad back knee, or I get thrush every month before my period. So it's really kind of seeing how those things interconnect, and functional testing kind of, it looks at, again, at how like optimal your body is. So I do things like stool tests. So that looks at like what's going on with your microbiome, what's going on with like your gut health. So is there a lot of inflammation going on? Yeah, and then any like parasitic like things that are sort of happening in your gut. And then I do things like hair mineral testing, vaginal microbiome. Yeah, there's so many like different ones. I do like hormone testing as well, to seeing like what your body's like excreting. And yeah, they're just like really good insights that, you know, obviously you can go in blind and you can be like, oh, okay, well, taking a look at your diet, you're probably low in this, this, and this. But when it comes to especially gut health, which is quite a big reason as to why people come and see me, is that you can kind of be shooting an arrow in the dark, because gut health it's so unique to absolutely everyone.
Yeah.
And a lot of symptoms will show up for similar like kind of conditions. And so you might be experiencing bloating, I might be experiencing bloating, but there might be two different causes to what is, you know, causing our bloating. And we might do the same diet, and one of us might get better and the other might not. And that's why really kind of exploring and having some actual data of like, okay, what's actually going on there? And you can really start to then pinpoint, and it might be a case of, you know, yours is cleared up and mine's, you know, we might do something completely different, and then mine clears up from something vastly different to yours. And it comes back to the point that we're all different. You know, what causes one person's acne might be completely different to someone else's. I almost wish that I'd like had access to this when I was, you know, 15 and like really struggling with my skin. And, you know, of course I had my mum, who she was always like interested in sort of the natural world, and she was like, you need to drink more water and you need to eat more pumpkin seeds. And, you know, when you're 15, you just want a pill, you know, you don't want to put in the hard work with your diet. And I wanted to go to Costa and drink frappes with my friends on a Friday after school.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to.
Literally, yeah, when I was 15, yeah.
And it's like, I didn't want to do the healthy stuff. And it was only really when I went through a period of anxiety, and I was like on a family holiday, and like my leg like started cramping up, and my like foot went a little bit numb, and it just kind of set off this cascade of I got really like over worried about my health. And I think these days, even in like my like profession, I think in and people don't tend to show it. They hide it really well, but it's quite rife on social media that people can be so strict that to the point where they get worried about it. And, you know, when I was like 17, you know, I was like strictly, I was saying this to someone yesterday, that my cousin was a makeup artist and she'd asked me to be like her model for something. And I was so worried about her putting chemical, like makeup product on my skin after I'd literally been wearing like natural makeup or no makeup for, you know, so many years. And I was worried about what that was going to do. Whereas, you know, the mindset that I have these days is it's a case of it's for a couple of hours and it's not like I'm doing that all day, every day. It really doesn't matter that much, especially when it comes to like my mental health. And that's what I really kind of emphasize to people, that you don't have to be perfect with these things. And I see that more like obviously on Instagram when you get people who they go into supermarkets and they start calling out these foods saying, you know, this food is bad for you, it's poisoning you. And yeah, and they just give no one like any other option. And I think that's wrong. And you can't go in there and say, this is bad for you.
Right.
Stop eating it, and then not give an alternative, because you just leave people thinking, oh well, I can't eat that now. So then they go and find something else that they kind of think is like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But then you get to the other extreme if you get then like a sort of online, I assume like a lot of like nurses and doctors, they have like social media accounts where they call out people who are spreading food fear. And not that I disagree with that, but I disagree with both of those types of accounts where we demonize one thing, but then we then preach that it's okay to eat anything. Because fine line. And I just don't think that either like extremes work, because you need to have some guidance as to what is like, you know, contributing to your symptoms. But then you need to have that little bit of flexibility with it and realizing that it's okay to, you know, when I go traveling, of course I like try the local cuisine, and, you know, maybe that's different to what I would eat, you know, at home. I'm trying to give an example, like when I went to Belgium last year, I had Belgian waffles, like, you know, that's part of like sort of the culture of, you know, these different countries, that just because, you know, it meant drizzling it in chocolate sauce and ice cream, it's like, oh, that's a little bit, you know, it's not what I would use. And it's like, no, like, I'm experience it. And a lot of people sort of in my profession would err on the side of, oh no, like, you know, got to be like totally strict with it. And
almost a bit judgmental, or like looking down on other people who might be in the same field or profession who are, you know, doing that, for example. I've seen that.
And you need to have some fun with it, because otherwise you just end up like crushing your own mental health, and then next thing you know, like you're taking your own meals to, you know,
taking your own dressings and things like that.
And, you know, and I get it, like at some points, like you do have to be strict for like a certain amount of time, but it shouldn't be something, you should be able to get to a point where you can go out and enjoy a meal at a restaurant and it not flare up your symptoms. You know, to a certain extent, you should still be able to live your life and not have it ruled by food. And I see that more commonly like these days, that people are just, they're so confused and, you know, they feel very limited, and they're eating the same things every day because they're like, well, they're my safe foods.
Right.
And, you know.
Yes, true. Because even then, like, even if those things that they're eating are kind of producing like symptoms of some kind in them, is something that they're used to, or it's something that they've perhaps pushed down, or that's become their normal. So it's almost like to venture away from that without the proper guidance, or without, you know, whilst feeling anxiety, whilst being at the receiving end of this influx of information, kind of just coming back to square one again and thinking, oh well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing because it's too risky to try something else.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of people know what they need to do, you know, and certainly like maybe like people my your age, like they know what is classed as like healthier and what's maybe, you know, something to limit, say. But I think what people then kind of lack is that accountability. And I always remember like a lecturer like said to me, she's like, you're basically a mum but with references. Because everyone's mum like is always saying, oh, you should eat more of this and you know, eat
Oh
less
my
of
gosh,
that.
I love that. That's so good.
And essentially that's what I do tell people. I'm like, well, you need to start doing this. And I had one client who was like, my mum, like, you know, no, actually it was her mum saying like, oh, well, I've told her all of these things that she needs to do, but obviously I'm her mum and she doesn't want to
Yeah.
listen. And that's where that element of like accountability comes in, of,
Definitely.
you know, someone saying, right, I'm going to call you in 2 weeks' time and see where you're at. And of course, you're going to do it. And of course, when you invest in yourself and you know that someone's there checking in on you, you put the work in. Whereas if it's just you and it's just something that you've seen on Instagram and you're like, oh, I suppose that's useful. And then you just don't do it. And then nothing changes. And I always like, because I like the, you know, a couple of quotes, and one of my favorite is, if nothing changes, then nothing changes.
I thought you were going to say that. I like that
Yeah.
as well.
And it's like,
it's so simple, really, isn't it? It's simple, but it's actually like, yeah, like that is true, you know?
Yeah. It's like you can be stuck in the same kind of thing. And, you know, even myself, I'm like guilty of being like moaning about something. And it's like, well, that's not going to change unless I change something. You know, you can be stuck in the same kind of health symptoms of being like, oh, I don't know what to do. And like, it's causing me so much distress, but you just don't do anything about it. And then it just stays the same, if not, you know, getting worse. So you do just kind of, and I think a lot of people are afraid of change, because it's scary and it's unknown.
I think with health, that's it's so interesting to think of that quote and kind of that concept in regards to health, because sometimes I see health and like our bodies in the sense of, if we've got something quote unquote that's wrong in our bodies, like whether it's a deficiency, whether it's something that we've just not been paying attention to, something we've been ignoring, you know, even if it's something that we've ended up deeming normal, like having a headache every other day or feeling, you know, a lot of brain fog after eating a meal or whatever it is. I feel like there's these symptoms that just kind of coasting, and those are the symptoms that we just end up just, you know, ignoring in a way and just becoming used to. And then every so often there'll be like a flare up in the body. So it's almost like those monitor machines that are kind of stagnant, and then there's a flare up, and then that's the moment during that flare up where your body's telling you, okay, right now I'm giving Claudia the chance to, she's seeing it right in front of her. She can take, you know, the red pill or the blue pill. She can decide if she wants to take some control over this, even if it's something as small or as simple as booking a doctor's appointment or whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be like a crazy leap into, you know, okay, I'm going to change my life from tomorrow. I'm going to start doing this, whatever. And then after that, once we've made the conscious decision to ignore it or to listen, if we choose to ignore it, okay, then the symptoms become stagnant again. But as they become stagnant, they're building up more and more for the next flare up, which is going to be bigger. And the next one, which is going to be bigger, and it will be subtle changes in the symptoms, like the headaches will get slightly worse, or they'll get slightly more frequent, or the brain fog will come now after 2 meals a day rather than just one. But because you're used to it, you might keep pushing it down. And then the next flare up is your body going, okay, Claudia, like, what are you going to do now? I'm showing you again, you know, and that's kind of how I see it. And it's funny because I think that relates to all types of health, like emotional, spiritual, mental, but physical as well. And it's interesting how that same thing happens. It's like, are you going to make a change? Are you going to notice that there is something that's not right, and you know it, and you have been feeling it, and you've just been telling yourself that you haven't been feeling it, you know. But it's ended up just being you creating a sense of normalcy around things that aren't actually normal, you know.
Yeah, no, and I think it's kind of like in similar regard to, like, if you, like, say, I'm a big believer of going to therapy, that you will continue having this lesson brought to you until you learn it. So it's like the universe will present the same like issue that's like presenting within yourself again and again until you learn, that's what I'm doing, and then you decide to make a change with that. But it's interesting you say that you can either choose to go down like two paths of listen and do something about it, or suppress it. And it's when we get that suppression over and over that things get worse. And I think that's why, like, it's so amazing when I meet people who are, you know, in their 20s and they're like wanting to do something about their health, because I see clients who are in their 50s and they've had their issues for like 30 years. And it's like, you're coming to me, 3 months it's probably not going to cut it, because if you've spent 30 years getting yourself like into this hole, it's going to take some time to dig yourself back out of it. Because, you know, when things just sort of start off as a little niggle, they then just like get bigger and bigger as the more you ignore it, essentially. So from something that happened 30 years ago, you may have got some food poisoning and you just then decide to ignore it afterwards. Then it starts this bout of, you know, IBS, where you're struggling to go to the toilet, you know, every day, and it just then gets worse and worse. And before you know it, 5-10 years later, you're going like once a month, if that, and you have to use laxatives. And then that's when it really starts impacting your daily life. And, you know, you're getting people like sort of coming to me and they're like, I can't leave the house, or like, you know, well, yeah, it's like, I can't leave the house for the next 20 minutes because I'm on the toilet, or I can't go out and see my friends, or I can't, you know, go and do the things that I used to be able to do. And especially when it comes to digestive symptoms and, you know, when it comes to poo, no one wants to talk about that. And no one wants to admit that, you know, they need to go to the toilet, you know, a couple of times an hour, or they can't go to the toilet at all, and it's just building up inside of them. And it's the same with, you know, periods, because it's just got this like taboo surrounding it. And obviously I'm very comfortable talking about it because I have to, like, with my job, whereas a lot of people, they suppress it because it's not right to talk about bodily fluids and bodily function. And certainly when I was taught at school, it was just a little bit of a case of, okay, like, you know, you have periods, you know, and we didn't do anything like on nutrition. And it's even a case of like the sexual education that we had. I don't know if it's different now, but when I was taught, it was a case of, you know, don't ever get an STD or an STI, just, you know, wear protection, but never like, what happens if you do?
Right. There's never the conversation around the health, the actual health component surrounding it, which is the whole, it's a health issue. So yes, you might think that you're teaching people how to prevent it, but not really. You're just putting a little plaster on it, you know?
Yeah. And you're not teaching people. It's like my cooking classes that I had as a teenager. We probably made scones like that many times, and, you know, I loved cooking, and I would have done that as GCSE. It would have been like money for jam for me. But it's just a case of, it was cancelled because no one wanted to do it, because it was just kind of a bit of a doss around, you know, for people who thought, oh, this is a waste of time. But then it's a case of, you're in your 20s and you don't know how to cook, you know, and it's like, I don't know who taught me how to poach an egg, but it certainly wasn't my school teacher. And you know,
and that's a skill. That's a good life skill to have.
literally,
It's
like,
something that takes a long time to perfect as well. So
literally, and it's like no one taught me to put vinegar in like boiling water in order to poach an egg, and that's something that is way more useful than learning some of the stuff that you know I did at school. And it's like, and I know it's like this reliance on like computers these days, and it's kind of a case of, well, I never have to use algebra because I can just type it in on Google, and there is that. And obviously you could ask Google how to poach an egg, but at the end of the day, no,
you still have to be the one doing it. So.
Yeah, and I just think there are more useful things, and certainly a lot more people are coming out of school thinking, oh, well, I don't really know what to do, so I'll go to uni and I'll do something, and then
right, exactly,
you know, they come out of it still being like, oh, I still don't know what to do, and still struggling along with those like basic life skills that they would have been taught, you know, if they'd been taught properly like a few years before.
I think that's so interesting because it's like what you were saying earlier about how when you're kind of a teenager, maybe even like late teens, you're not that bothered about your health. Like it's not even something that you even think about. And in a sense, it's like you not caring about your health at that age feels like a rebellion. Like, you know, it's the same thing that I did when I was in sixth form with my friends. We'd just go in our free periods to Costa and just get all the like frappe drinks with all the syrups and all the snacks. And obviously at that age, you know, you don't really feel full. You don't have an awareness of your body. Even say you get to your 20s and you're still not that bothered about your health, you have naturally developed a more of an awareness around your body anyway.
Yeah.
Even just from witnessing like the changes and the fluctuations growing up and becoming an adult. So I think at that age, that's the rebellion. And then when you sort of come out of that period, the rebellion is caring about your health, almost like that in a way that seems almost radical.
Yeah.
Such a funny thing to think about. And even coming back to the topic of education, like when I think about it, there's always things that you enjoy during school. There's always subjects that you enjoy more, teachers that you find more engaging and stuff. But I think it's almost like the depth of what we are taught. So obviously we're not going to be taught like degree level nutrition or what you learn, you know, when you're 4 or a lot more years of studying nutrition. But yeah, you're not going to do that same depth of learning at school. But I think like to even if even like an ounce of that was on the curriculum of, you know, talking anything that we're learning about that's involving health, whether it's sex education, whether it's, I don't know, like anatomy, whether it's biology, whatever it is, just if even a tiny bit of that knowledge surrounding food, what we're consuming, the importance of our hormones, and not just learning this hormone does this and this happens in the brain when blah, 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 because that's only going to, you know, reach a certain number of people that maybe are naturally scientifically minded or that like facts and like things like that.
Yeah.
And when I started learning about, you know, the importance of gut health and hormone health and all of these things, I realized that that wasn't something that I just started to find interesting. That was something that I had always found interesting. Because like similar to your mum, my mum was also kind of into, she was into like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. She was always she also started to do like a life coaching, health coaching course as well when I was younger. And so that was always something that was kind of prevalent, but it wasn't really something that we ever delved into that much. But still, I feel like it was probably more prevalent than it was in other households, in other families.
Yeah.
And I think like I said, if even an ounce of that was taught in school, I think that passion might have even been ignited sooner. And I might have thought, oh, okay, so something that I know I'm good at in school is literature, for example, and writing and the more creative subjects. But then there's this random thing that I never thought would interest me, where my biology teacher, a subject that I have little to no interest in, that I'm not really that good at, that I don't find engaging, has just started talking about how the food that we eat actually impacts our energy levels. And, you know, that's a very basic thing. It doesn't have to, even just explaining it like that could be taught to someone in year 8, you know? Even just that, I feel like that would have maybe ignited that passion in me and ignited that kind of engagement. And then I feel like maybe when I left school, I would have had more of a clear idea of, oh, okay, so I know where my talents and gifts lie. And I also have found this thing that I'm really interested in and I want to explore more. How can I maybe merge the two in that sense? And I feel like if people had a knowledge of that, you know, of course, if you give students the option, oh, do you want to do a cooking class? Well, probably most of them are just going to say no because they can't be bothered.
Yeah.
They can't be bothered. They're going to have to bring the ingredients in. They're going to forget them. They're going to have to spend the whole hour standing up and doing stuff. Of course, they're going to say no. But if you do it in a way that means something more than just cooking a meal because you have to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
And trying to kind of ignite the interests of each individual student, because even in like the health coaching world, nutritionist world, no two people are the same. Like we were talking about how the way that we would coach and the things that we learned, the way we learned, are probably so different. And that's just us two, you know, and there's things that you're probably super passionate about that I'm not as interested in, and vice versa. And so I feel like it wouldn't, if you're, you know, a young person and learning in school, it wouldn't just be a case of, okay, do you like maths or not? Do you like English literature or not? But really centering everything around your health and well-being from a 360-degree perspective, not just physical, but mental, emotional, spiritual, understanding how all of those things are just intrinsically tied together. I feel like you wouldn't be able to find someone who didn't have a tiny seed of interest planted in their minds of some aspect of health and well-being.
Oh, absolutely.
And I feel like that could just change the trajectory of how children and young people start to care about their health and well-being. And especially, like we said before, having it not come from a parent, having it come from somewhere outside of being like, this is important, and you know, we are learning this for this reason. So yeah,
I think it's definitely a case of I need to go. I mean, that's the thing, like a lot of students, they're not interested in cooking. I mean, you would have taken like any 15-year-old, probably would have been like, not really my interest, you know. Their mum was probably cooking for them. But yeah, that's the thing. Teenagers, they're not interested in health or, you know, fueling their body right. But I could bet anything that they are interested in having clear skin, better mental health, stable energy levels, you know, better periods. They're all things that people struggle with silently, especially at that age where you're definitely not talking about them, because there's definitely a lot of stuff that I wasn't talking about, you know, and certainly the effect of like having acne had on my mental health, that I would have done anything for that, but not quite anything. It was more of a case of I wanted a pill like to get rid of it, and you know, I was waking up in the morning being like, oh, hopefully it's like magically cleared up overnight because I've used this new cream. But no one was ever kind of making the link that, oh, have you actually like thought that maybe your diets are like a little bit deficient in a couple of things, or you know, maybe you could try eating more of this, rather than just like the band-aid solutions, because you know, there's still band-aid solutions even in the natural world. So people slate like medicine as being like a band-aid solution because you're just putting like, you know, a sticker over a wound by like giving a pill. But that still happens like in the natural world, and even like by taking certain like supplements or herbs, people just take it to coast along and like just cover it up a little bit. So when people come to me and it's like, why are you taking like these supplements? And they're like, oh, well, I take it for this. And I'm like, does it work? And they're like, not really sure. Or they're like, they're taking something, and say if they're like struggling with thrush and they've taken these feminine probiotics, which, you know, help, you know, balance their, you know, vaginal microbiome, but they've got to stay on those supplements, because if they stop taking them, then their issue comes back. And if you really kind of get to the bottom of what's causing that issue, you don't need to take the feminine, you know, probiotics for the rest of your life. And that's the difficulty with a lot of things now that are so accessible, especially supplements in health food stores. Is that it's a case of you go in and they might say, oh, well, you could take this thing, and then you're on a lifetime prescription to a supplement that technically a lot of the supplements, it's like we should be getting this from our diet, but because we're all so time poor, we don't have time to eat properly. So therefore we just think, oh, well, if I take this supplement, then it'll just go away. But the analogy that I kind of like to use in that is, sometimes you have a house which is, it needs a bit of work doing, and it's, you know, falling apart a little bit. So what you do is you put the scaffolding up, and for a few months you keep that up, you do the work on the house, and then you should be able to take the scaffolding down and the house should stay up after the scaffolding has been taken down. And it's a similar thing with supplements. You need them sometimes to build yourself back up, especially if you're like severely like nutrient deficient, or, you know, you've got a lot of issues going on. Sometimes food can only go so far, but it's a process by working with someone that they might say, okay, we're going to put you on a couple of these supplements. These are only temporary, and you're going to stay on them for the time that we're working together, and then you're going to come off them, because you should be able to get lots of this through your diet. You don't need to rely on taking an A to Z multivitamin when, you know, things like liver, which a lot of us don't eat because it's liver. We do, you know, it's like nature's multi-nutrient. It's that like dense in like vitamins and minerals, because we're like really fussy these days, and we don't, and you know, getting things like that isn't accessible. But you know, it's a really cheap cut of meat, and it just contains so many things, whereas we'd just rather like take a multi-nutrient. And I know like everyone has different diets these days, and you know, when you're vegan or you're vegetarian, you might have different balances because of that diet. And it's the same with, you know, whether you're on a keto diet or a gluten-free diet, your microbiome will be different because of all of these different diets and the way that that interacts with your body. But yeah, I know a lot of people, they're on like 5+ supplements, and some of them don't actually work. And it is just giving you expensive wee. Like there's so many things out there these days that, you know, people text me, and like I've got friends who are like, oh, what do you think to this? And I'm like, you could get more nutrition out of, you know, like for say example, there was this greens powder recently that I did a post about, that the label behind it is very deceiving, and it gave you like the nutrient values of like I think 100 grams rather than the actual serving size that you'd have. So if people see that, oh, it's like it's giving me all of these like extra nutrients, like I'm getting 100% of my, you know, vitamin D every day, and you actually take a closer look at how to read the label and the serving size, and you're realizing that actually you could get more nutrition from an apple and a piece of steak than buying,
exactly.
you know. And that also counts as, you know, that can be part of a meal. Whereas people think that, oh, okay, I can just eat how I'm eating and then add a powder into it, which, you know, it might be like 40 quid. And they're just continually buying that every every month, where it's like if you just altered your nutrition slightly, you could save yourself 40 pounds and still feed yourself a very balanced diet that's tastier than something that tastes like grass every morning. But especially I see that with more sort of younger women, that they're seeing stuff and they're being marketed heavily to with these products, and they taste bad. And I don't want to necessarily like name and shame, but there is like a protein company that I see a lot, and it's marketed towards hormone health. And
you can name and shame on here. I do. It's okay. It's okay for me.
But yeah, it's the Free Soul one, and it is like I've tried it myself because I thought this looks interesting. It's got some nice added nutrients. It's got maca in it for female hormones. I tried it, and honestly, it's the worst tasting powder I've ever had. It was just disgusting. And I know other people have said the same, that they're like, I've tried it and like it's just awful like to taste. I don't know if it, obviously regardless of the taste, maybe it does have some benefits, because I'm all for people having more protein in their diet, and if that's the way that you do it, carry on. But if it just tastes like that and you just think, I don't even know how much I paid for it, but people do, and they're just doing it because like, oh well, I saw like an influencer recommended it to me on TikTok Shop, and said that it helped my my acne and my periods and my PMS. It's just like you can get you could just eat some actual food. Or
even you could be better off even just like doing some kind of even just really base level research of your own, and just looking into, okay, what are all these ingredients here, and I'm just buying it because I think, oh, it's going to help give me more energy or relieve my period pains or whatever. Even I think it's a lot of it is like the intention that goes into it as well, because I do believe that especially when it comes to like cooking and making food and then consuming that food, that does have a big impact on how that affects your body, how you digest it, things like that. And I think in some ways you're even better off saying, okay, maybe I've heard a lot about maca powder, I'm going to do a bit of research into that. It's only going to be very base level. Maybe I'll just be asking ChatGPT what it does. And then maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll source some that's good quality, not too expensive. And I'll just try and implement that into my routine, into my cooking in my own way. And I'll, figure out if it tastes good with these ingredients, or if it tastes bad, or if it just doesn't work for me at all. But just to kind of take a bit of that autonomy back, because I think we've kind of been deceived a bit into thinking that if someone who knows even just the tiniest bit about health and wellness advertises something to you and you buy it because you want to feel better, then that's you having autonomy. But it's not really. It's just marketed in this shiny label of like supplementing. The supplement is a supplement. It's exactly what it says. It doesn't equal the same thing. Like even just having that awareness of like, okay, during the winter months, I know that I take vitamin D because the sun doesn't come out that much, and I know that I'm still getting vitamin D even on a cloudy day, but it's not the same. But that doesn't take away from the fact that if I don't see the sun for 7 days a week, I still have to go outside. I can't just take my vitamin D and expect everything and then wonder why I'm not feeling good, because it's like we were saying before, it's not just that thing on its own, it's everything surrounding it. When you go outside, you're going for a walk, you're getting fresh air, you're kind of embracing the seasons, you're telling yourself, you're rewiring your brain and telling yourself, I don't have to stay inside and just supplement with this vitamin D because I don't see the sun or because it's too cold. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of taking away from, all of those supplements do say on the back, this is not a substitute for a balanced diet.
Right, it's a supplement, not a substitute. Exactly.
Yeah, and people still do. Like, I had someone ask me, they were like, I'm just always getting sick all the time. Like, what can I do like with my diet? And I remember them saying to me once, because they were in the sort of the fitness industry, saying that they just ate like meat and supplemented a greens powder because he didn't like vegetables. And I was like, right, well, I remember you telling me this thing about you not eating any vegetables. I could give you a great supplement, but I could also just tell you to start eating some fruit and vegetables, some like fresh fruit and vegetables. Because the thing is with supplements is that people buy, like, say, vitamin E or, you know, B6 because they've heard that it's good for X, Y, and Z. But in nature, things don't come on their own. You don't get one food that has just a single nutrient, because all of these nutrients, they come packaged together because they work together. And that's why, you know, don't ever recommend like a single B vitamin for something. It's a case of take a B complex because you need all of them to work together. That's the thing with food, that they come so like neatly packaged in one, that that's where like you can get issues with supplements, because people are just like over supplementing one thing, and it might help, but then you also throw off a lot of other things. And that's why it's just important to go back to basics. Just focus on real actual food, focus on getting outside, rather than like you're thinking, oh well, I'll just spend my whole time inside, but it's okay because I can take vitamin D. It's like there are so many other benefits to going outside than just vitamin D, and it's also free. And I get really caught up in like, well, how can I like save time? Can I save money? And it's like, I was talking about this yesterday because I had an event on yesterday. We were talking about how everyone's like just so time poor, and especially like as women, I think we're more susceptible to ill health than men for many reasons. But specifically when we're talking about like, I know you did a podcast episode on like being an ex-feminist, but if we like disregard a lot of things that occur now, it's a case of like back in the day, there would have been someone always at home, someone making all of the food, and there would have been, you know, the male would have gone out to work and the female would be at home, you know, making the meals and looking after the kids. And that's why like these days we've got both parents are going out to work and they're both coming back. Maybe they go to the gym, maybe they've got like kids and they need to take them to after school activities and everything, and before you know it, it's 7 o'clock and you're coming home and you're thinking, I don't want to cook dinner, I don't want to cook something fresh, I just want to chuck some chicken nuggets and some, you know, chips in the oven, and it's done, and I can chill out and I can relax on the couch and watch some TikToks. But if, you know, and obviously we'll never go back to that point where like women don't work and like stay at home. It's just the reality of this is how our lives have changed, and it's kind of, okay, how can we make the best out of a bad situation in the end, and what can we do to start incorporating a little bit more time in our lives? How can we like prepare ourselves? Is it a case of, can you afford to have that extra day off work each week so that you have like some time to prep things? Or you know, you have to make a sacrifice somewhere, but we all like, we want absolutely everything.
That's it, isn't it?
And I remember someone telling me like there's like 3 pillars like in life. There's your health, your wealth, and your relationships. And he said that he believes that you can work on 2 and you can hold the other one, but most of us want like all 3 of these things. So we want like an amazing relationship, loads of money, and our health be fabulous, but quite often you can focus on 2 and the other one can maybe like slip away a little bit, or you can just about hold it, but you can't have all 3 at the same time. Although I'd love to meet someone who has all 3, but that is the reality of the situation. So it is a case of, okay, if you work a really busy job and you start work at 7 o'clock in the morning, how can, you know, going back to the personalized approach, is you'd be working with me being like, okay, how can we actually fit this into your life? You know, is it a case of you sacrifice something to do with your job, or you sacrifice, you know, eating something on the go. As I was saying this yesterday, that okay, let's say you start at 7 and you commute for an hour. Maybe it's a case of on the weekend you can make something in bulk, put it in the freezer, and then you've got breakfast for every single day that you can either get out in the morning or you can get it out the night before and then maybe eat it on your commute. The ideal situation would be that, you know, everyone could make their own breakfast in the morning and take their time with it and eat something that's really nourishing and properly sit down and eat it. But that's not the case for a lot of people, and it's realistic to say to everyone, you need to do that. So if it's a case of you eat on the train something that you've prepared on the weekend that you've got in the freezer that's quick, I'd rather someone do that than go hungry and they get to work and they're like, right, I need coffee and I need biscuits, and that's the first thing they're eating.
Yeah, that's true.
It's weighing all of those things up, and sometimes you can't think of that yourself. It's why, you know, why people go to therapy, and it's like having someone help guide you through it and guide you to the answer, because we can't do everything on our own. And I know you said before, like, everyone wants to be an expert on everything, but it's like I can be an expert on one thing and be bad at a lot of other things. It's like you cannot, you have to kind of choose, hey, what do I want to be an expert at? Is that my job, or do I then need to start being an expert in 10 other different things, and I've just not got any time for it? You have to kind of be realistic with yourself, and if that means like going to see a nutritionist or a PT or getting a business mentor, you know, you don't have to do it all on your own. And it's stepping away and thinking about that, because I know that a lot of people don't want to do that.
It's so true, because I think as well, like, when we do see these people that online that come across as like experts in a field that we don't even know is actually their field, and oftentimes like it's a way that they want to come across as experts, whether it's for engagement or whatever it is. I think, you know, we can even implement that into our own lives in some degree. Like if there's something related, since we're talking about health, wellness, nutrition, something that we're really passionate about, acknowledging that it's like coming back to this idea of bio-individuality. Like there is no one size fits all, and it sounds like such a cliche thing to say, but it is so true, because there are benefits, pros and cons to everything. Like even some things that, you know, other people might, like we were saying before about when we're traveling and trying like the local cuisine and eating things out, maybe in cafes or whatever, with ingredients that we would not even think of stocking or keeping in our homes. There are benefits to our health to doing those things, as much as people don't want to admit it. And of course, like it's within reason. It's not just like doing that every single day. But I think, you know, just trying a little bit to like let go of our ego that tells us everyone should be doing, I don't know, hot cold therapy because of these specific reasons, or no one should be doing hot cold therapy because of these specific reasons. If you kind of just step away from that for a second, step away from that attachment that you have to that belief and why you think that is so important, you can actually see that both of those things, whilst they're completely opposite, are right. But that doesn't mean that you are 100% right, and that doesn't mean that the other is 100% right. It just means that what you are both saying is right, but it's not the be all and end all. And I have this conversation with my mum a lot, especially talking about hormone health and how I used to be someone who was doing intermittent fasting till midday, and then I would just tell people, well, I don't get hungry until then. And it's like, well, of course not, because that's how you've trained your body not to be hungry until then. And I used to, when I then kind of realized that I was not doing myself any favors at all, and I kind of switched to the opposite of like now eating breakfast at like 8 o'clock in the morning every day. Like this morning, me and my boyfriend, we literally just had a at 8 o'clock, what do we have? We had like leftover black beans, guacamole, kiwis, feta, sausages, and for some people that would be like a nightmare at 8 o'clock in the morning. But even myself, like I'd seen myself maybe getting a bit too militant in that approach in the conversations with my mum, simply because I knew how much that had helped me. And I think ending up kind of finding this balance of like, oh, okay, when my mum talks about the fact that she likes to do intermittent fasting for these purposes, she's not necessarily wrong in anything that she's saying, because she has done her research. She does know what feels good in her body. She does have that awareness. But also we can have that conversation where, you know, maybe I can quote unquote educate her, so to speak, on certain things that she didn't necessarily know before, because maybe the podcast she was listening to, or the information she was researching, might have already been a bit biased towards that, for example.
Yeah.
And maybe I can also learn from her, like stepping away from my own ego and thinking, oh, well, she doesn't have the knowledge that I have because I know that this, and this, and actually hearing like, oh, well, okay, that has actually benefited you in a certain way compared to what you were doing before and the habits you had before. And I think like we can all implement that to some extent. And also to go back onto what you were saying about the three things, was it health, wealth, and relationships?
Yeah.
I think it's that idea of having, especially with your health, finding a way to have and build a solid foundation for your health, even if that looks completely opposing to what it looks like for someone else, even if it is tied in a little bit with your belief systems and what, you know, your ego a little bit. Like, I think to an extent that's okay, like, you know. And having those foundations, so that if you are then working with someone, like you said, who's got a really busy schedule, has to commute at 7 o'clock in the morning, if they go through a period of their life when they have to commute at 6 in the morning and they really don't have time or whatever to make the same breakfast the night before that they would have done previously, that they already have those foundations, so that they know they're going to do everything in their power to keep up with those habits that they've already instilled and put in place. But if they don't quite meet that benchmark, it's okay, because they do have those foundations in place. They know that that period of time is not forever, and ultimately they know what makes them feel really good and what makes them feel their best, and they know that they're going to come back to that. And I think you can implement that with not just work, but if you're going through a period of your life where you're traveling a lot, or if you're, you know, not going to be in your home, you're not going to be able to home cook your meals a lot. And then that kind of comes full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning, of then relieving yourself from that obsession and that fixation, because I think that really comes from that lack of control. But what true control is actually being able to say, I have these solid foundations, so now they work for me. I don't have to be nitpicking and controlling everything, because you can't control everything. You can, you think you can, but you can't. There's always going to be an element that, I mean, you could go to the extreme of, like we said, bringing your salad dressings to restaurants with you, and there'll always be something that you feel like you can't control. But having those foundations and then taking that step back and watching them work for you, whereas your previous foundations and habits might have worked against you. And you see how that just completely flips on its head, really.
And letting go of that control. I mean, that's certainly something that I like really struggled with. That I was like, oh, well, if I do these things, then I feel like I'm in control, but in actual fact I'm not. And I thought it was interesting what you said, like about there's nothing that's like inherently good or bad. It's everyone's like, you know, 100% right, but also 100% right in the other thing. And I suppose that kind of comes back to like food. It's all kind of, it's in the dosage. Like if you ate 2 kiwis, that could be really healthy. But if you ate 100 kiwis, probably not very healthy, you know. And that's what it comes down to. It's like, you know, everything can like kill you with a dosage like high enough, you know. And it's I think the terms, it's hormesis or something, and it's like a little bit of like stress is actually good for you. It's like the element of like
Mm.
cold therapy, that like that shock and that stress on your body, just a little bit of that is actually quite good for you. But then it's the case of too much of that can then flip you into that side of, oh, it's probably quite, you know, dangerous. And not a lot of us like see things as like, okay, that's good and that's bad. And I don't tend to use that word very often, because I don't think that like certain things are bad. There's stuff that I would just be like, it's not, you know, it's not worth it. But I don't like labeling things as bad, because I think it's not a nice language to use, certainly surrounding food. And I think there's a lot out there, like, say, you know, like Zoe, where people are like testing their blood sugars, and there's like more access to like personalized nutrition these days. But at the end of the day, it's another marketing thing that leaves people with thinking that they've got control, but then they also haven't. And, you know, say for example, it wasn't a client of mine, it's someone else's, that she had one of these continuous glucose monitors and found that when she ate blueberries, her blood sugar would go up. So then she stopped eating blueberries. Now, I think that's wrong. I think it's, you know, it's having that flexibility of seeing like, oh, okay, like blueberries have given me like a spike, but blueberries they're healthy.
Right, because in stopping eating that, what benefits might you be then taking away that you're not getting from, say, they're the only fruit you eat, or if that's the only way you're currently implementing fiber or antioxidants or whatever it is into your diet?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that other extreme.
Yeah, and it's like I focus more on, okay, what can we add in rather than take away from your diet?
Right.
And too many people are like, okay, I need you to tell me what to eat. And it's like, I'm not going to give you a meal plan, because, you know, I know a lot of people, they want a meal plan, but it's just, again, that itself is too restrictive. You should be able to, like, I give you some principles and you should be able to put that together yourself. Or maybe at first you need a little bit of a helping hand, and, you know, I say, okay, I want you to eat more protein, and then I give you some ideas for protein-rich breakfast, and you're then informed on, okay, I know that this, and this contains protein. So one day, like, say if I gave you a meal plan and on day 1 you're going to do a protein smoothie, and then day 2 you're going to do porridge with, you know, nuts and seeds and whatever, and, you know, day 3 I've asked you to do like a sausage hash or something. And then maybe as you start to implement that meal plan and you get to 3 weeks in and you're like, oh, okay, well, Tori's told me that, you know, eggs are rich in protein. I've learned that, you know, chicken is rich in protein. I'm going to make myself a chicken and egg breakfast muffin. And I want you, and even though that wasn't on the original meal plan, you've learnt those basic principles in order to be like, okay, well, as long as it's protein rich, it's okay for me to deviate from a meal plan, rather than I give you a meal plan and that's what you stick to for the rest of your life, because that's depressing and it's boring. And that's when people sort of slip back into their old habits of like, oh, I'll just have a piece of toast because it's easy and I lack inspiration, you know, for that. Whereas teaching someone like how to do it themselves, that's the more important thing, rather than like handing it to them on a plate, which is easier. But from a long,
but then they have to learn how to do it by themselves at the end after that anyway, because even if you hand something to someone on a plate, it's like the monitor thing, isn't it? It's like personalized nutrition. Okay, great. Okay, now it's down to you.
yeah,
and it's like, oh, I have all the tools and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to build the structure.
yeah, it's like, it's that element of, okay, when you're working with someone, you have that accountability, but when you stop working with them, unless you're like going to work with someone on a long-term basis and you're going to see them every month for the rest of your life, you might do that, but not a lot of us would do that. That it's a case of, okay, after those 3 months that you've been working with someone, what's going to continue like afterwards? Are you going to stay motivated? Are you, you know, do you have enough information to carry on what you're doing. So I remember my driving instructor said to me, he had someone come to them who passed her test, and he was like, all right, okay, go to the end of this road and turn right. And she said, oh, we didn't learn that way, so we learned how to turn left. And he was like, what? And so the driving instructor had taught her the route, but not how to actually drive. So she had passed her test because, yeah, she'd learned how to do the route, but not how to actually drive, and didn't have that confidence too. And I think the same can be said for nutrition, that, you know, I can teach you the route, but I need you to actually learn how to drive, because I'm not going to be there afterwards. And I think that's incredibly important.
So true. It even reminds me of being at uni and people who, because I was studying languages and being in French class and having people who knew like every single grammatical rule and could conjugate every kind of sentence perfectly, but they were missing like the accent. Like they didn't look, they in general, they might have been confident, but when they spoke, it didn't feel natural. Like even being absolutely perfect in the language, actually realizing, oh, that's not actually how people speak, and things like that. And it's so cool how you can implement that into health. It's like, yeah. I know we're running a few minutes over time, but let's just go into our final questions that we ask. I ask every guest on the podcast. So it's not like a one-word answer, but it's kind of, I like to think of it as like a bit of a quick fire round, like whatever just comes to you. So the first question is how, and if you want this, you can relate this back to your health if you want to, since that's what we've been talking about, or you can just whatever comes up. But the first question is, how would you want to look back on your life in 70 years time?
Ooh. Yeah, that like I lived it and I wasn't ruled and restricted by this career itself. You know, we spent a lot of time like just being all and like compassed about things, but you sort of forget how to live. You don't want to look back on it and think, oh, I missed out on those things because I was too busy, like consumed by my health, or lack thereof.
The second question is, what would you want people to know that would make them live their fullest experience of life now?
Have breakfast.
I love that so much. Yeah.
You know, I think it's underestimated, and obviously people have said about breakfast being the most important meal of the day, and it is. So yeah, but if that's the one thing that you kind of take away from it, that it just really sets you up. And I suppose as well, like to not be so rigid with it all. You know, there's freedom in the flexibility.
And what does being present mean to you?
It's taking that time out to relax and to prioritize you, to like focus on, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup kind of thing. So just focusing and coming, it doesn't matter about anything else that is going on around. Come back, you know, to you, because you can't have your health without it.
What are 3 words that define your current experience? So it could be literally right now in your life in general, in terms of your health.
Ooh, it's an interesting one. I'm going to say happiness, clarity, and plan.
And finally, was there I always like to ask people if there was anything in particular, any kind of external resource, whether it's like a book or someone, a specific teacher, or even just a quote, anything that kind of was one of the catalysts in your journey when it came to taking control over your health? Or if it really just completely came from within, that's brilliant as well.
I gotta say, I actually I do have it right here. This book, it's called The Period Repair Manual.
Oh, I've not heard of that.
By Lara Bryden. And I was just so fed up, like, of my periods and of them, like, just ruling my life. And I got that. And I think I look back on it now and I understand it more now than I did when I was, 17. But it is just, it's a wealth of information, and I wish everyone had access to that book, because and if you have access to the internet, you have access to that book. It's just all encompassing, and I can't even describe it.
Oh wow,
how much cool. That I think it's just a great book. Obviously it can get a bit technical at times, and I suppose not many people want to receive a medical type of book for your birthday, but it's just amazing. And anyone who's struggling, and certainly with their hormone health, it's a great starter just to be like, oh, okay, I can learn about this and implement some practical things without having to see someone one-to-one, because you get a lot of books out there that they talk a lot of fluff. Whereas it's obviously it's very medical based. And I do love it a lot.
And the final thing that I do on this podcast and a guest episode is I have my oracle card deck. Excuse me. And I just have them all laid out here, and I'm just gonna run my hand over the cards, and if you just tell me when to stop. And I'll stop and pick a card and see if that resonates in any way with our conversation. Okay.
Stop.
Okay. Let's see. Get out my little description manual. Where are we? Here we go. So, okay. The card we got, it looks like this.
Order.
The card we got was disorder. It says, it is time to push against order. Oh, this is so great. Ignore the rules. Being a force of disorder causes the universe to realign, to take the dissonance and make harmony with you. Kick against those that would quiet you. I love that straight away. It's just ignore the rules. I think that's brilliant. So in alignment with our conversation.
Yeah, especially in the last, as I was saying before, that the last month has just been so full on for me, and almost not a little bit disordered, but just a little bit of chaos. So I'm ready for the calm, and I know that it's set me up to be okay, I know what I don't want, and it's that. I want more sort of peace and calm and clarity going forward. But
that was one of your words, clarity, as well. So
and you only kind of learn that through experience, I think. I think there's so many people out there saying don't make the mistake that I did, and come by my course to heal that. And it's do you know what? Sometimes you have to go through that stuff in order to get that clarity. And then, okay, this was my journey.
We have to go through that to know that clarity even exists. If otherwise it's not clarity, otherwise
so you don't have that motivation to go and take that.
Well, thank you, Tori, so much for coming on the podcast. I'll put any links and stuff in the description below, but if anyone wants to find you and kind of see a bit more about what it is that you do, maybe if they're thinking about working with you or just hearing more about what you do and talk about in depth, is there anywhere specific that you would kind of direct people towards?
So I'm probably most active on my Instagram. It's just Tori Collins Nutrition, and that's the same for my website. And I do lots of things, and I do have a monthly newsletter. It doesn't bombard you, and I've also got a free healthy breakfast e-guide that people can download from the link in my bio. So if you just head to my Instagram or my Facebook, and you can find me there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll do another episode in the future where we go more in depth on specific topics, but that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia.